Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Ike Krieger.
Hey, this is Ike Krieger. Welcome back. I know that in our previous episodes, we've covered a lot of information, and you're probably saying, all right, how do I use this to turn my contacts into contracts more easily and more often? Well, I think a demonstration is in order, and I went back into my material and I found something that I wrote many years ago called The Sales Horror Story. And it's a two-part story. The first part ends with a not-so-happy ending. And the second, using the system, has a very happy ending. After completing part 2, I'd like you to ask, how much of myself do I see in part 1, and how much of myself would I like to see in part 2? An account executive in the printing industry, we'll call her Pam, stood up at a meeting of sales and marketing professionals and proceeded to share a personal story that nearly made her cry. As she spoke, we could see her attitude shift back and forth from frustration to anger. Her story went something like this. Pam's responsibilities at work centered around developing new accounts and retaining accounts already on the books. It seems that for nearly 3 years, she'd been trying to land the printing business of a large regional company with headquarters located in her city. We'll call them XYZ Inc. Pam was an effective account exec with 8 years of experience in the printing industry. She was meticulous with her customer management software. She kept on top of her tickler files and used her information and research to make sure companies knew who she was and who she represented. She'd been in regular contact with XYZ by phone. Granted, these were marketing and schmooze calls, but Pam had a good phone spiel. She was certain XYZ knew who she was, but still, each time she called, she got the same response. We have all our printing needs handled, but thank you for staying in touch. Pam wanted this account. She had courted this company for 3 years, and when the opportunity presented itself, she'd be ready. The call finally came. In the 8th month of the 3rd year, a woman phoned to inform Pam that XYZ was working on a major printing project and they were interested in possibly doing some business with her company. She asked Pam if it was okay for a team of 3 people, including a vice president, to take a tour of her facilities. Pam was ecstatic. All the work she'd put in, all the updates and research she'd provided XYZ, all the phone calls she made, they all might finally bear fruit. A tour. Why, yes, it would be a pleasure, replied Pam to the lady from XYZ. The appointment for the tour was scheduled for the following afternoon. That night, Pam delivered a mock presentation to herself in the bathroom mirror. She was going to be ready. Pam got to the office bright and early and spent the rest of the day working and looking at the clock. Appointment time. 1 person arrived instead of 3. Pam hid her initial disappointment and remained energized. After all, she was meeting with a vice president from XYZ. His name was Victor. This was her chance to prove to Victor that she could handle any printing project XYZ sent their way. This was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. Pam asked Victor if he had any questions before the tour started. He looked at his watch and said he was crunched for time. He would prefer to get started. Pam armed herself with flyers, brochures, and a portfolio that was her pride and joy. Pam presented Victor with her most detailed brochure as they made their way to a door in the back of the main office. She opened the door for Victor, and they walked into the shop. Without missing a beat, Pam launched into her well-rehearsed and detail-laced presentation. She placed special emphasis on the machinery and the state-of-the-art techniques her company provides. She boasted confidently that what set her company apart from the other printing companies was the degree of service and personal attention her clients received. Victor gave an occasional nod during Pam's presentation, but said little. He seemed focused on the brochure given to him by Pam. All of a sudden, Victor, now looking straight at Pam, asked a series of rapid-fire technical questions about the machinery, and without missing a beat began requesting sensitive and possibly confidential information. Victor asked a couple of questions that required divulging exact costs and markups. Pam felt uncomfortable revealing this kind of information. She hesitated. The whole thing didn't feel right. She decided to answer anyway. She wanted to be of service. She wanted to prove to Victor that she knew her stuff. Victor listened to her answers and scribbled a few notes on the brochure. He then came right out and said it. "I know printing equipment, Pam, and your markups are awfully high for the type of machinery being used." Pam, not missing a beat, began to overcome the objection. She explained how, with overhead and union cost, etc., her prices to him would be in line with the other corporate clients. And then Pam proudly said, "And of course we do the very best work in the entire city." The tour ended. Pam and Victor walked back into the office. Pam asked, "So, what do you think?" Victor started nodding again. Pam took a breath and asked for the sale. "Are we ready to do business?" Victor replied politely enough, "This was interesting, and I have to think this over before I move ahead. I need to digest all the information you gave me. We'll be in touch," which even Pam translated as another way of saying, "Don't call us, we'll call you." The knockout punch was delivered when Victor, with a big smile on his face, lifted his eyes from his watch and told Pam that what made him the happiest about the tour was that it had ended at 3:30. It was late enough that he could go straight home without going back to the office. Pam thought to herself, "Whoopee. 3 years and still no order." Pam was fit to kill somebody, and this did not exclude herself. She'd put in so many hours, so many months on this project, and she didn't want to see a repeat of this again in her future. Pam finished her tale of frustration by telling us that she was able to summon up all her inner strength and get back on the phone, which was something else she didn't like to do. She needed someone else to court. After all, it is a numbers game. Now, that's what I call the traditional sales horror story, and I would guess that you've been through something like this in your sales past. Heck, you may have been through it yesterday, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's an option. What if Pam could shift that last scenario 180 degrees? What if there was a way to have Victor assume the responsibility of giving a self-generated sales presentation and then close the deal himself? Does that sound backwards? Well, it is. And it really does work that way. P.S. At the end of the evening, I approached Pam and asked her if she was interested in learning an easier, less stressful way to sell that just might increase her sales and prospecting success. She looked at me with that great smile and said, "I don't really think I need to change my method. I'm a good salesman. In this case, the guy that XYZ sent over was a jerk." All right, let's move straight to part 2 and look at the way the sales call could have gone. Victor enters the building and is met by Pam. They exchange handshakes, hellos, and business cards. Victor's card identifies him as a VP with XYZ. "Pam, I'd like to begin with an apology for my colleagues not making the appointment. They couldn't clear their schedules in time." Pam, with her ever-present smile, replies, "Well, I'm delighted that you're here and actually a little surprised that you decided to take this meeting at all." "Well, as my secretary mentioned," said Victor, "if we're ever going to work together, we need to see your facilities. And I'm looking forward to showing you our operation," said Pam. "But it's a little loud in the shop, and I was wondering if it would be okay to have a brief conversation before we begin the tour." Victor looks at her and says, "Did you have something you wanted to show me first?" "No," said Pam. "I'm really curious about what you were hoping to accomplish today." Victor thinks for a moment and says, "Well, we're looking for a backup printer, and since we've known about your company for a while, we thought we'd check out your facility. We'd like to see for ourselves if a new provider can handle projects like ours. Plus, at these face-to-face meetings with possible suppliers, we like to find out what we need to do to get, well, your best price." "Best price?" asked Pam. "Sure. If we want to work together, we would need to lower our cost as much as possible." Pam says, "Lowering cost usually makes sense, but just so you know, we're rarely the lowest bidder on any job, and sometimes we're the most expensive. But if we can put price on a side burner for now, I'd be interested in knowing on what else you'd be basing your decision to work with us." Victor replies, "There are other factors, but right now, why don't you just tell me what you think you can do for us?" "Well," said Pam, "the good news is we have a lot of services that would be a good match for your company, but I'd want more information about your needs before I point you in a specific direction. But if it's okay with you, I've got a couple of questions of my own to ask, and you probably have a few that you'd like to ask, and within a few minutes, we'll probably know whether or not there's going to be a fit here. Is that an okay way to start?" Victor says, "I guess so. Sure." Pam, smiling, speaks, "And if anywhere in our conversation you decide that what we offer is not what you're looking for, how comfortable are you telling me that?" "Well, I'd be comfortable with that. Why not?" asked Victor. "Well, some people are uncomfortable saying no," replied Pam. Believe me, I have no problem saying no." "Excellent," replied Pam, "and obviously a yes would be better, but this way we can avoid using a maybe or an I need to think this over as a polite substitute for," she points toward Victor. He responds, "No." Pam says, "Exactly. And if it turns out we provide what you need and you're going to be the judge of that, we'll need to take a look at your budget range to see if we can complete the project for that amount, okay?" "Well," said Victor, I don't know about that. I'm a little uncomfortable divulging those figures. Don't you just have a price list?" Pam's unforced smile brightens. "Sure we do. And our price list isn't job specific. Basically, if we're going to work together, I'd like to do it within your budget. So when we get to that point in our conversation, you'll either feel it's appropriate to share or you won't." "Well, okay," said Victor. "Great," said Pam. "And if it turns out that we can provide what you need, who besides yourself would be involved in the decision to move forward?" Victor responds immediately, "Just me." Pam curiously asks, "No accountants, significant others, managers, partners, or board members?" "No," said Victor, "just me." "Great," replies Pam, "and if it turns out you decide to use our services, I'm always interested in knowing what led to that decision. Is that something you'd be willing to tell me?" "Sure, why not?" "Great," said Pam, "why don't we start our tour?" "Fine with me," said Victor. As Pam leads Victor towards a door in the back of the office, they pass a display table covered with various brochures and flyers. Gesturing towards the display, Victor asks, "Should I take a look at any of this material?" Pam says, "That's great information. You can have it all. But let's finish our tour first, and then you can gather as many of them as you'd like." Pam opened the door for Victor and said, "This way." They walked into a shop filled with a noisy chorus of humming machinery churning out printing projects. Pam turns to Victor and asks, "So, how can we be of service to you?" "Well, I'm not sure you can, and that's why I wanted to take a look at your operation," said Victor, eyeballing the shop from one side to the other. They continued walking. Victor began to weave his way through the shop. He stopped at a few machines and watched them in action. From over his left shoulder and just above the sound of the machines, he heard Pam ask, "Who are you using for your projects?" "ABC Graphics," replied Victor. Pam nodded her head. They've got a good reputation. Why aren't you just using ABC for this project? We might, said Victor. We just wanted to see what you would be willing to offer as an alternative. Well, that depends on what you're looking for, Victor. Let me ask you this off the record. What do you like about the way ABC has handled your account? Victor was caught slightly off guard by that question. He thought for a second and spoke. Let's see. What do I like? The people at ABC are nice, and they've been doing most of our work for years, and when their stuff looks good, it looks really good. Like I said, Pam responded, they've got a great reputation, but I'm curious, Victor, if there was one thing that you could change or make different about the way ABC handles your account, what would that be? Victor's posture changed. He moved a step closer to Pam and switched to an almost conversational tone. Well, actually, there was an issue that cost us a bundle. What happened? Asked Pam. Pam looks around and she turns back to Victor and says, I want to hear everything you're telling me, and it's always a little loud here in the shop. Here's an office where we can sit and talk for a minute. Is that okay? Sure, said Victor. Pam escorts Victor into a side office on the shop floor. There's a small conference table. Pam gestures for Victor to take a seat. He does, and then she does. Pam begins. Oh, yes, it's much easier to talk in here, and then steers the conversation right back to, you were about to tell me about an issue with ABC that caused you a hassle? Yeah, a hassle, said Victor. ABC did a job for us last month, and the colors weren't right. The final run didn't look like the sample. That's not good, said Pam. It was a real headache, replied Victor. ABC told us it had to do with the format of the proofs we gave them, or an uncalibrated monitor. I never got a satisfactory explanation, but it was too late to find a different printer. So we ended up running the entire order again. ABC met us halfway on cost, but I was still over budget and late on delivery. And that's the main reason you're looking for a backup printer? Asked Pam. You bet, said Victor. That and the level of service just isn't the same as it used to be. Bottom line, the moment I signed the check for those extra dollars, I knew I needed to have, let's say, more printing choices. Not a happy story, said Pam. Not happy at all, replied Victor. Victor reaches into his jacket pocket. He pulls out a folded sheet of paper, he unfolds it, and hands it to Pam. Here, this is a sample of what we need. Pam inspects the piece. This is nice, Pam said. She reaches into her pocket and retrieves her own folded sheet of paper. Do you mind if I jot down some notes? Well, be my guest, said Victor. Pam asks, how would you like to proceed? Well, first, I need a guarantee that work will look exactly like this sample. Okay. In addition to the guarantee, what else? Asks Pam. Deadline. The job has to be done on time. This project is time sensitive. It has to be completed and delivered on schedule, said Victor. Pam asks, when is that? 6 days. That's the 14th. 14th, Pam says. How many pieces do you need? 100,000, said Victor. Off the record, Victor, I don't know if we can get that done in 6 days. I'll have to talk to production, but let me ask you, what would happen if you don't get the project completed by the 14th? Oh, that's not an option, said Victor. We would lose the account. It's that simple. Pam writes down a few more notes. Critical deadlines can make you nuts, but 6 days is cutting it awfully close on an order of this size. Victor, if getting the job done on time the way you want it ends up putting you over budget, are you going to be okay with that? Look, I'm never okay with spending more money, but I've got to have this done right and on time. Okay, so let's go over this and see if I've got this right. You need guaranteed color matching, you need 100,000 units, and a 6-day delivery. Is that everything? Victor looks at her and says, believe me, that's enough. Pam said, so any other issues we need to address? And Victor looks at her and says, no, not really, not now. Pam says, I have one thing, do you mind? You mentioned you weren't overjoyed with the service you've been receiving. Describe for me what good service on your account would look like. Victor thinks for a moment and says, for one thing, you'll return my calls. And really, it's about doing what you say you're going to do. That's a reasonable thing to ask, isn't it? It is, replied Pam. So, Victor, in round numbers, what's your budget for this project? Well, we need to get the job done for $30,000. Pam thinks for a moment and says, 6 days. I don't know if I can get it done for that in 6 days. I might, but with the time constraint, we're basically looking at a rush job and it might end up costing more. Should we continue? How much more? Asked Victor. Well, we'll know in a few minutes, but if it costs more than you've budgeted, where will the extra money come from? Victor says, if I know the job is going to get done right and on time, and the extra amount is reasonable, I'll get the funds. Can you help me with this? Pam says immediately, I think so. What's our next step? Victor says, I need a proposal from you on my desk at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If it falls in line with our conversation, I'll issue a purchase order and we can get going on this. Pam says, so, what would need to be in the proposal to get going on this? The guarantees I asked for are no more than a 10% cost override, said Victor. And when I get that proposal to you, you're prepared to issue a purchase order, said Pam. Victor replies, that's right, you'll get the contract. Well, I'm pleased and a little surprised, said Pam. What made you decide to move ahead? To be honest, said Victor, you didn't try to sell me anything, and I have a feeling that you'll get me what I need. Pam smiles and says, thanks for sharing that. Will I be working directly with you or someone else on your staff? I'm going to handle this one myself, said Victor emphatically. Great, said Pam. I look forward to the completion of a successful project. They shake hands across the table. By the way, said Pam, do you still want to take the tour? Maybe some other time. Thanks. It's only 3:00 and I can get home early and spend some time with the kids. That's great, said Pam, and I'm delighted that you took the time to come in. I'll have the proposal on your desk by 9 a.m. That's it. That's how the appointment could have gone using the yes formula. Who gave the presentation? Who did the close? Who was in control of the conversation? Where were the objections? For those of you with a normal reserve of skepticism, all I can tell you is that sales calls really can and do happen almost exactly like this example. The system works, but you have to redeploy a few of your existing communication skills. But the shifts are simple, and they can increase your business by 20 to 50% over the next 6 months. And in some cases, you can experience a closing ratio as high as 70, 80, 90% of your clients who qualify after your examination. Use the system. It really works. Now you've seen the yes formula in action. I hope you took a lot of notes. I hope you're looking at how this can play a role in your next or future sales calls. You hear me say it over and over again. This system really works. Use it. This is Ike Krieger. See you next time.